What's going on, good people? Rich here. Welcome back to another episode of the Culture Garden podcast. Shout out to school. Shout out to Ray P. They will not be joining us on this episode. This is a special edition Halloween episode, something we've never done because myself or Rachel are not really horror movie people, and school is somewhat, halfway, half out. But we do have someone special here with us today to get into this horror genre bag, and I'll introduce her in a second. But before we get started, as always, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate y'all for continuing to listen, to watch, to share, to subscribe, to rate, to leave us all your comments and reviews. Thank you so much. We can't do any of this without you. I do want to give a shout out to School's Guilty Pleasures. He just had Glitter drop a couple weeks ago. He's already, or last week, excuse me, working on the next movie as we speak. And Rachel, and we got y'all, the television podcast. It'll be coming back in about 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, with rap shit. And I think we might have another show somewhere down the line. We might be doing two at once. So we'll figure all that out. But just want to keep everybody updated. As I said earlier, we do have a special guest with us today. Culture Garden family, a listener, someone who I indirectly know because I kicked her with her husband on opening day. If you're from Cincinnati, you know opening day is it's like a notch below Christmas. Hopefully, he didn't tell you too many stories. That was a wild day. Yeah, we're just gonna forget that. Opening day is undefeated against me. But Mia is here to talk about today's film, which is Candyman.
Hello. Yes.
How you feeling today, Mia?
I'm excited. I'm so excited to be here. Like you said, I'm a avid Culture Garden listener. And I hit you up after every episode I watch to
Yeah,
give you my
yeah,
thoughts. And
absolutely.
I've always felt like I was part of the conversation. So now it's nice to actually be here and be able to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's my fault. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just really excited. That's all.
Definitely excited to have you, and it's a pleasure to be here and be able to talk about something that I'm not familiar with as far as horror movies and that genre, and we'll have a conversation about it. But you do. I'm always. I know a message is going to be coming through after we drop. Maybe a few days. One of those. I got a bone to pick with you. I got a bone to pick with y'all. One of those messages, or obviously some complimentary messages as well. But it's always good to have Culture Garden family just on the show doing what you like to do, which is discuss movies. We made this for people like you. So thank you for taking time out of your day to join us, or join me, should I say. I'll say us because School and Rachel are here in spirit, even though they ain't on the microphone right now. But today's film, I mentioned it, is Candyman, the only slasher film in the horror genre with a black serial killer. And normally, School, myself, and Rachel will go through the why this movie, but when I had this idea and kind of presented it to you because I thought you'd be perfect to talk about horror movies, you're the one that said Candyman. So why did you choose this movie?
Ooh, this is so good. Okay. So, like you said, it's the only horror movie, um, like particularly mainstream, that has a black serial killer. And not necessarily just serial killer, but the the antagonist, if you will, is
Mm-hmm.
a black man. And not only is he a black man, but he has a very black backstory. It's very culturally significant to me. And this was my first horror experience where I really got to see a black story being told in the way that they've kind of expanded upon that as we've gotten into like the most recent installation that came out in 2021. And I just
Mm-hmm.
felt like, you know, um, the more I was listening to the Culture Garden, I was going through the catalog and I'm like, oh, I don't see any horror movies on here. Halloween is coming up. This would be the perfect time to do a horror movie. I told you, I'm like, there are a lot of black representation in horror movies. And have you ever thought about getting into something like that? And I just felt like it would be the perfect, maybe first of an annual, maybe, I don't know, but maybe the first way to introduce a horror movie onto your podcast. Candyman would be like the perfect opportunity, the perfect movie to do that.
Yeah, I'm feeling the selection. I'm gonna say it a million times. I'm not a horror guy, y'all. I'm not. It's just not my genre. It's not my thing. I don't understand it. Like I said, we'll dive into that conversation a little bit deeper. But I did feel it was the perfect one to kind of kick this off, and to have someone who's very knowledgeable. We've sent things back and forth as far as Plex Media. Shout out to Plex Media. I reached out to them, and they responded, just telling them how much we appreciate their page,
Love their
um,
page.
because I mean, it was made, like I said earlier, for people like us who love films, the work and the effort they go into giving us tidbits of information, remind us whose birthday it is, the anniversary of certain films. It does a lot of that. Like Culture Garden reposts a lot of their stuff because they make it so easy. So
Hmm.
shout out to them. But we sent a lot of things back and forth on that, and there are a lot of movies and films. You rattled off a list of just black people in horror films that you would love to discuss. So I think we can make this an October tradition, and I'm looking forward to more. But as we get into this film, the synopsis: the Candyman, a murderous soul with a hook for a hand, is accidentally summoned to reality by a skeptic grad student researching the monster's myth. As far as the stats go, this film was released October 16th, 1992, so it is 31 years old. Directed by Bernard Rose, written by Clive Barker and Bernard Rose. We'll talk about Clive Barker. He didn't write the screenplay, but he did write the inspiration. There was a short. Film has a budget of an estimated $6 million and made 25.7 million worldwide, 5.4 million the opening weekend. It is currently streaming on Peacock and AMC Plus. And if you are wanting to watch the sequel, which came out in 2021, it is currently streaming on Prime Video. So, as far as awards go, there were 10 nominations and 5 wins. No major awards. All due respect to every award panel out there, but there were no major, what you would consider major awards. However, 3 of the 5 wins did go to Virginia Madsen for Best Actress, which I know she's been in some other things, but this is what I think she's known for, being a Candyman. She really did a great job. She almost wasn't in this film.
I saw that.
Yeah, so the director's wife was originally supposed to be in it, but even beyond that, if she had turned down that second time or turned down when she was offered it, do you know who they're going to get?
No. Who?
An unknown 1992 Sandra Bullock.
Oh, wow. Okay. That would have been a
We
different film.
Yeah, so we just did Demolition Man on School's Guilty Pleasure a few weeks back. That came out in '93. So once again, very unknown Sandra Bullock. What do you think? How do you think that looks?
Ooh, now I love Sandra Bullock. I am a
Yeah.
huge Sandra Bullock fan. Honestly, I feel like she would have killed it. I do think Virginia Madsen was perfect in the role. I think that she brought a lot to it. I feel like if it was Sandra Bullock, it may have been a little bit different, a little bit of a different film.
Mm-hmm.
I do I have thoughts because
Okay. Okay.
when you were going over the awards, when I was looking at the awards myself, it just kind of stuck out to me that Tony Todd wasn't a winner of any of the awards for
Okay.
this movie. Not saying that Virginia Madsen wasn't very deserving. It just occurred to me that when I or anyone that I talk to or know kind of revisits Candyman and talks about it, the one thing that stands out more than anything is Tony Todd to me and a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
I know, and it was just really surprising to me. When
Yeah.
this movie came out, I was only 2 years old, so I wasn't really aware of any of the media surrounding it, how they did the promo, anything like that. It came to me much later, but
Mm-hmm.
just seeing how that was, you know, the way that it kind of was received was really surprising to me.
That's interesting. I don't know if that's maybe that goes along with the horror genre where you have these characters that I don't know. Because all right, so you think of Halloween, you think of Michael Myers, you think of Nightmare on Elm Street, you think of Freddy Krueger. To your to your example, we should be thinking of Candyman when we think of the film Candyman. We should think about Tony Todd. I don't know if we spend too much time on Helen as far as what our memories are of this film. I think in the culture it's definitely Tony Todd, and I think outside of it, it might be Helen. And I think that's that weird line. And there's a lot of race, class conversations they're trying to have in this film. They definitely do it in the second one, but in this one, even in 1992, they were trying to do a lot of those things. So that's a very interesting point by you. As far as the cast goes, we have Virginia Madsen, as we mentioned, as Helen Lyle. She almost passed on this film because she's allergic to bees.
Mhm.
So she's allergic, and the director told her, like, "No, nah, you're just afraid." And she's like, "No, nah, I'm really allergic." She had to go get tested. She's really allergic to wasps, but she said, "You know, you're an actor, you do anything for a check." He said, "We'll just have paramedics on standby," which is wild. I don't care if I'm allergic to bees. I don't care if paramedics are there or not. I'm not messing with it. Tony Todd, as you mentioned, as the Candyman, this is his favorite role and movie that he's done. He's mentioned that. He's always wanted to play his own Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame type of character, and that's how he views Candyman. I think they set it up in that manner as well. Do you know who was considered for the role of Candyman?
I think I do. I think I do. And if
Mm-hmm.
I'm right, it would be Eddie Murphy.
It was Eddie Murphy. Yep, you came prepared. I'm all right then. I see you. I see
I
you.
told you I did a little bit of research. I know a little something.
Yeah, they chose Tony Todd because he's 6'5". They wanted that taller figure. It's funny now. In 1992, we wouldn't have known, but a few years later, we get Vampire in Brooklyn, which isn't it's a scary movie, but it's still Eddie Murphy. It's got some different elements. I talked about it last week. I almost chose that film
I love that
for a Culture
movie.
Garden selection last week. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I just didn't. I wasn't moved to talk about it. You know what I mean? Sometimes these films you like them, but you got to be in the right mind frame to talk about it, or mindset, should I say?
Yeah,
Um,
and I think for a first horror movie, you know, Vampire in Brooklyn is a horror movie, but it's also very much a comedy. I
it very
think
much.
um this is a little bit more in that genre specific realm.
For sure, for sure. Like I said, it was a great first choice. I always thought our first horror movie, you can argue if it's horror or not, was going to be Get Out.
It
Um,
is, definitely is.
yeah, but here we are. But here we are. We have Xander Berkeley as Trevor Lyle. Casey Lemons as Bernadette Walsh. We talked about her in Eve's Bayou because she directed Eve's Bayou. Talk to Me, Black Nativity, Harriet, I Want to Dance with Somebody. She was also in Silence of the Lambs, another horror film. So yeah, shout out to her, Casey Lemons. She's a treasure. Vanessa Williams, the incredible Vanessa Williams, is Anne Marie McCoy. DeJuan Guy, Jake. I have to shout out DeJuan Guy because he plays Jake, the little kid. He was also in Little Giants, and I would be remiss if I did not mention one of my top 5 movies ever. Baby Boy, he played Looney Tune, one of the dudes that stole his bike at the liquor store and that him and Peanut found in the park. He was the
Oh,
one that they whooped, that Peanut whooped. That was him.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Anytime I get a chance to shout out somebody from Baby Boy, I have to. But yeah, I thought he was great in this film. They even called him One Take Jake on set because
See,
they said he did all his scenes flawlessly first take.
I don't want to jump ahead, but yes, we
Scene
know
stealer.
that.
He's
Yes, he was
he's my scene stealer, no question. So I gotta ask you. I think I know your answer. Classic or not?
absolutely 110%.
I think I have to call it a classic, even though I it's been decades since I've seen Candyman. Candyman, you know about Candyman. You know what it's about. You know not to say the name. It's still referencing music. Kendrick Lamar had a lyric on "Damn," you know, say my name and I promise you're gonna see Candyman. Like it's still very culturally relevant. There are still people who are afraid to say Candyman 5 times in the mirror. It was supposed to be 13 times, but they reduced it to 5. So I'm glad they did that because that would have been a lot in the theater to hear you say that shit that many times. Better than the last movie. This is a new category. So what's this better than the last movie we reviewed, which was all about the Benjamins? What do you think?
Now, this is,
2 completely different movies.
yeah, it's a way different genre. I would have to say yes, but that's just me.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
I know. A lot of people may not agree. And again, that goes back to the fact that a lot of us don't really mess with horror movies like that, or they won't look at them in the same regard that they look at a movie like All About the Benjamins, that, you know, is widely loved, is something that you can sit down and watch anytime. But for me, I'm gonna have to say yes.
I'm not mad at it. I respect it. I respect anytime somebody says something and they stand on it. So for me, no, it's not. But we already talked about my reason, and I'm not a part of this whole genre. Maybe we can win me over time, but as of right now, it's definitely all about the Benjamins, no questions asked. So we talked about the origin, and we'll get into it of the film. So it was inspired. Candyman was kind of inspired by urban legends such as Bloody Mary and The Hook. And the film came out of fruition after a chance meeting between Bernard Rose and Clive Barker. He had completed his own film adaptation of Nightbreed. He wrote a story called The Forbidden, and he's a Clive Barker's a novelist, so he
Mhm.
writes a lot of, I guess, a la Stephen King, and things like that. But he had Rose had expressed interest in The Forbidden, and Barker agreed to license the rights. It was supposed to be about the themes of a British class system in contemporary Liverpool,
Mhm.
and Rose decided to flip it to Chicago and the Cabrini Green projects, which, for me personally, the Cabrini Green projects are legendary, but there are two movies in particular. One's a documentary, which I think is probably the best documentary ever made. Definitely the best sports documentary, which is Hoop Dreams.
Oh.
Arthur Agee was from the Cabrini Green projects, and then obviously He Got Game. Spike Lee had the Cabrini Green projects in the beginning of He Got Game in the opening montage with Arthur Agee standing in front of him. Obviously known for street ball, but notorious, and they even talked about it in this film how dangerous, I guess, for lack of better terms, the Cabrini Green projects were. So they're one of the nation's most um, notorious projects, housing projects, especially
Mhm.
back in 1992. It's the real life Carter, I guess, would be how you would want to describe that in a sense. And then he brought in this whole theme of race and social class in inner city United States. And I don't know if you know, you probably do because you're very you're thorough with the research. Tony Todd came up with his own backstory for Candyman.
Yes,
Yeah,
I knew
what
that.
did you want to get into that a little bit?
So I will try my best. So I did know that this story was based off of The Forbidden by Clive Barker and it's part of his horror anthology. I actually have this book. I own it in a digital form
Mm,
called The Books of Blood, Volume 5. And The Forbidden is I want it.
we got to check on you, man. I don't know why you reading stuff called the Books of Blood, man. What's going on over there? You all right?
Listen, I love horror. I love reading it, watching it, and we'll get into that. I'm telling you, I'm gonna convert you. But
Okay.
like you said before, the original story was based off of the Forbidden, but there
Hmm.
wasn't really a backstory for Candyman in the Forbidden. So they let Tony Todd kind of create this backstory to his character, which I really appreciate because I think um which we can get into whenever, you're ready. When we think about like the new movie, the 2021 Candyman and the 1992, it is a it's an amazing movie, but it was written and directed by, white director,
Hmm.
screenwriter, which he did an amazing job. But I think that it would have been a completely different story if he wouldn't have had the opportunity to put that, cultural reference into the backstory.
Yeah, yeah, and the fact that Tony Todd even brought in the interracial factor of it, making that a part of it, that whole forbidding um, black man, white woman. Yeah, I think it was
Mhm.
originally set in 1890. The original character, I think, Granville T. Candyman, and leading to a fatal lynching by a white mob that tied it in. I just and so in 1992, the Chicago Tribune they wrote a piece that had a lot of prominent black filmmakers being upset with the film um, because they thought it perpetuated racial stereotypes, and they were upset about it. And I think it goes to what you just said. You got this white director telling this story. You deliberately chose to shoot it in the Cabrini Green project, so you're bringing it to us. But are you the right person to tell this story? We kind of had this conversation when we talk about Menace to Society with Hughes brothers. Like, are you qualified to make this film and have this conversation with this larger audience because of who you are and where you're from? Um, I think Carl Franklin, he directed Out of Time and Devil in the Blue Dress. Shout out to Denzel. He's in both those films. He mentioned that there's no question that this film plays on white middle class fears of Black people. It unabashedly uses racial stereotypes and destructive myths to create shock. I found it hokey and unsettling. It didn't work for me because I didn't share those fears or buy into those myths. You also have Reginald Hudlin, who we've discussed on this podcast before. He described the film as worrisome, but didn't go on record about his specific issues with the film. Um, a lot of people were just reserving comment, and it was Bernard Rose met with several members of the NAACP while on set to make sure he wasn't painting Black people in a certain way. I know it's 1992 and they're really taking caution with this. Did you pick up on that? Did you feel, you know what I mean? Did you feel the whole racial aspect of it, or did you look at it more as, oh, we actually get a Black horror movie? You know what I mean?
So originally, I've been with this movie for a long time. I think the first time I saw it, I was maybe like 12. I'm 33, and it never occurred to me until I was watching a little documentary called about the 2021 film, and it was Candyman and the impact of Black horror. I think I sent
Mm-hmm.
it to you.
Yeah.
So it didn't occur to me until I watched that it could have been viewed that way as problematic. Like, of course, I always saw the racial element, but until I watched that and then went back and rewatched the film, it never occurred to me that it would have been playing on the white fears of Black people. I
Mm,
always kind of looked at it more so as like a Black trauma film.
mm,
I never really paid attention, and this might sound bad, but I'm sorry. I never really paid attention to the white people and how they felt about the Black characters. That wasn't really my focus. It was more so like the trauma associated with the Black characters. That was more, the white characters and their stories were entertaining, but it wasn't what I took away from the film until I saw the documentary, and they kind of stressed the importance of the 2021 film being, written and directed by Black people.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point that you made, and that's why I kind of asked it the way I did. As far as, did you just look at this as, hey, we get our own horror movie? Because I didn't feel that way either. I never once was concerned, and they put certain things in the film, such as when she got attacked in the bathroom by the fake Candyman. And they talked about how the projects were shut down or locked down because
Mhm.
a white woman got hurt. But there's been stuff going on here for so many years, and they don't even bother to come by. You can't even get them to respond to a 911 call. So they wanted to make us aware of it, but at the same time, I wasn't looking at the projects, the big bad. This is how white people view it, and you're gonna get followed around. I don't know if part of that is because um, Helen, the character of Helen, was so, there was no fear in her, in a sense, like the same fear that they display, or I guess mention that is feeding into. She didn't carry that going in there. She's climbing through. I mean, this is not. I don't think this is a. I think that's a her thing, because I wouldn't even climb through walls no matter where they were. But she was just kind of trying to get to the bottom of this, and she had a very curious mind. It's there. I think the fact that it came out in 1992 and we were young and we've had so many years for our brains to develop to finally realize it, that you see this movie for what it is
Mhm.
versus trying to retroactively go back and think about, if I was an adult, what would have I thought about the stereotypes that they're trying to display in this film? I understand the concern, I understand the opinions, but I never looked at it from that lens the same way you said. So that's a great point. Um, I know we want to talk about the second film, and this will be a good time. But before we do,
Mhm.
I meant to ask you this earlier. What is it with horror that fascinates you, I know you've always been into it for probably as long as you watch movies,
Hmm.
and just the overall conversation about Black people in horror. Like I'm a walking, I guess, embodiment of I don't rock with horror movies. I don't like them. I'm cool on that. I don't understand the idea of wanting to be scared for fun. And that's not just horror films. I don't do haunted houses. I don't do any of that stuff. And I'm not super anti Halloween. I'm not like, oh, the Satan's holiday. But I'm just, it's just never really moved me. I'm never not really a dress up guy. It just wasn't made for me. And I asked somebody who has seen his fair share of horror films, and I think that's a big part of it too. They don't have a big rewatchability factor. I'm a serial rewatcher, and I'm never just chilling talking about, oh, let me watch Scream today, or let me watch Halloween. And I don't know these movies well enough. I've seen all of them, but if I watch Halloween right now, I couldn't tell you who was about to die, how they're going to die, all of that stuff. I'm not that well versed in them. So that's how far apart I am from horror films. What is it that I'm missing?
This is so funny because you're gonna think I'm crazy. I think horror movies have great rewatchability. I will tell anybody that It Chapter 1 and 2 are like my comfort movies. On a rainy day, I
My
will curl
goodness.
up.
My goodness.
I will curl up in my bed with my snacks and I will turn on It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2, and it's just a good time for me. Now, I grew up in a family of horror movie loving women, like my mom, her sisters, my cousins, my older sister, even my older sister, like her kids, since they were like 3, have been horror movie lovers. And I don't necessarily think that it's wanting to be scared. It's if you really pay attention, I think a lot of people go into horror movies expecting to just, you know, wait for the jump scare, the gore, what have you. But horror movies have some of the best stories and
Mm.
messages. Like if you think about a lot of the really good horror movies, the ones that I like anyway, because I will say that I'm not a fan of all horror movies. There are a lot of subgenres within horror movies. I'm not a huge fan of anything demonic just because it upsets my spirit a little bit.
Does
So
yeah, that's what Rachel said. Do
yeah,
you do you count Leprechaun in the Hood as a horror movie?
I do. I do.
Okay,
And
that's what
and I'm gonna get into that too. So, you know, if you look at a movie like Get Out, I think Get Out was um so blatantly uh what's the word I'm looking for? It was very
it was
overt
speaking to. Yeah, it was definitely
messaging.
speaking to everything that was going on that we were feeling.
And I feel like that was the first time people really picked up on the fact that a horror movie could have a real message. But if you go back and watch a lot of horror films, especially Black horror films, dating back to 1992 with Candyman, or even a movie like Tales from the Hood, which a lot of people look at as just like a silly satirical horror movie spoof, which I
Hmm.
completely disagree with. It's actually very scary and it has a lot of really great messages in it. If you really pay attention to the horror film and look past the scares and the gore, you'll see that there are some really good stories there, especially when you have great horror writers like Stephen King and Wes Craven and now Jordan Peele who are getting doing these stories, and they choose horror, I believe, because fear is one of the rawest human emotions that you can feel. You get
Hmm.
down to the nitty-gritty of a person's true character when they're afraid. And I think
Hmm.
that it's a really great um, storytelling device to use. And I'm a film lover. I love film in all of its many forms. Like I love musicals, comedies, action, drama. I love it all. But I feel like there are a lot of missed opportunities for people who don't enjoy horror movies because they have some of the best stories.
You know what? That was very well said.
Thank you.
That was enough to at least open up the idea of paying attention to some for the stories. I might have you give me like a starter pack of just films that have really good stories. The gore and stuff, I'm not a gore doesn't bother me. I don't really care about all that stuff. I'm not a jump scare person. Like I mean, I will if I'm off guard, but I'm not a fan of it. But it's whatever. It's part of the genre. And I want to talk about Us one day because I need someone to explain.
Oh, I love Us.
Yeah, we'll have an off mic conversation. Maybe have a conversation on the Culture Garden. But the second film, you mentioned a lot of great stories and a lot of great messages, and I think that the sequel, I think it's important to emphasize this is a sequel, the one that came out in
Mhm.
2021 with Yaya um, and Tiana Paris. You mentioned in our kind of pre-production talk that that had a lot more, I guess, correlation with the social justices and things that we were going through at that time. How did you feel about the second one compared to this first one?
I'm not gonna lie, when I first heard about it, I didn't know whether it was gonna be a sequel or a remake, and then,
Hmm.
when I found out it was gonna be another sequel, I was a little skeptical. I was skeptical because a lot of horror movies today aren't necessarily, they don't have that essence, that grit that they used to have, and
Yeah.
I was a little skeptical, but I had faith in Jordan Peele and Nia DaCosta because I know that Jordan Peele is a great storyteller. He really is in his bag when it comes to horror movies and kind of telling Black stories. Um, when I saw it, I was pleasantly surprised,
Okay.
and I really liked how they handled it.
What what was it about the film that had you okay, this wasn't what I was expecting? Is it the fact that they tied it in both of the movies or some of the messaging that was going on throughout?
So, I just watched it, of course, to prepare, and what I was originally skeptical about was them capturing the essence of Candyman without having Tony Todd as that lead antagonist.
Yeah.
But the way that they ended up handling it to me was masterful. I loved that they opened up this world of Candyman and made it not just about Daniel Robitaille, who was that was the actual name of the character
Hmm.
who became Candyman. And they opened it up to make it about Black trauma. And so they took the backstory of Daniel Robitaille and how he suffered so greatly because of his affair and love for this white woman. And then they took another Black man who suffered tremendous trauma for racial reasons and brought him in and made him a Candyman. And then they would take
Right.
another character who suffered great trauma. And it was basically moving away from it being just this one central antagonist and making it like he was a representation of the trauma that Black men face racially. And he's like a manifestation of all of that coming back to haunt us and to get his vengeance. And in a way, and this is controversial, in a way, they kind of made Candyman the hero of the story and not so much the villain,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
maybe more of an anti-hero. Not, I won't say a hero because he was still wiping out a bunch of innocent people, but
But hold on, I'm sorry. He mentioned that they were going to call you innocent, but you aren't. Like he mentioned that at the end of the
yeah,
film.
he
So that was
did.
an interesting point.
So I wrote it down here because I knew that in the midst of conversation I would forget his name.
Who?
The character in the 2021 version of the film who
Who
they
played
based.
by Domingo?
No, no, no.
Okay.
Now that's another great thing about this movie.
Yeah.
So um he was great as like a catalyst, and I love how they played up on his like past trauma.
Hmm.
But it was his name was Sherman, and I can't remember the last name, but
Oh
Sherman,
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about.
who was killed by the police because he was suspected of putting razor blades in little white kids' candy, which of
Yeah.
course, once they killed him, they found out wasn't true.
Yeah.
And he kind of became the the new boogeyman, if you will. And I feel like what they did was whoever's story you hear first, whatever Candyman's origin story you hear will be the one that haunts you if you conjure him.
Yeah.
So another thing that I loved about the 2021 film is if you go back to the 1992 film and the baby that was missing ends up being the
Mhm.
main character of this new movie, not knowing his own backstory and how he's
So,
tied into that original film.
so let me ask you this: when you were watching the 2021 version, the sequel, did you pick up on that right away? Because the last name of McCoy, I think Anne Marie's
Mhm,
name was last name was McCoy in the original, and we knew her name was Anthony from the original. Did you put
mhm.
that together right away, or was it
I didn't
until he actually
put it
goes to his mom's?
I didn't put it together right away. What I didn't realize it until he went to his mom's, and then I
Yeah,
went back and watched the 1992 film again. I was like, "Oh, of course, Anthony was the baby's name, Anne-Marie McCoy." But
yeah.
and I feel like a lot of people probably, if they didn't rewatch the original films in order to get ready to watch the new film, it would have been a really good twist for everybody, like
And
it
I
was
think
for me.
that's yeah, I think that's part of the I don't know if it was on purpose, maybe the brilliance of not specifying if this is a remake or a sequel
Mhm,
because it's 29 years apart. So
mhm.
if you think it's a remake, if I think it's a remake, I'm not going to necessarily go back and watch the original unless I'm an avid fan and just want to do that. But just the way it was right there in plain sight, and I didn't pick up on it.
I didn't
Um, but I'm sure other people did, like you said. But I would have loved to see that reaction. I didn't see it in the theaters, obviously, but I'd have loved to see the reaction when she opened the door and they're like, "Oh, it's like it was one of those aha moments for me watching the second one."
for sure. But
I, one thing that you said, I do want to kind of piggyback on. I think this film, this the 2021, was doing what the 1992 version wanted to do. They just didn't know how to do it, and they didn't have the proper people to tell that story. Um, this one doesn't. Everything you made when you went through your points about horror movies having the best stories, right? That's what I felt this film was. I felt like it was more of a story. I didn't really even need killing. To
mhm,
kind of have that horror element. I feel like in moments they added the killing, like the scene with the girls in the bathroom. They
mhm.
added scenes like that to remind you it was a horror film, but it was much more than that. And
Yeah.
obviously Jordan Peele was a producer, and you do get some of those get out elements where they're not going over the top with it,
Mhm.
but you are reminded that you are still in this world. And I'm into true crime. Like
Me
that's
too.
been one of those things that I've gotten into over the past couple of years. More so, I mean, it's haunting, but it's fascinating. I love the psychology of it, just how what causes a person to do this, and
Mhm.
these people you can walk past them on the street and they might be into all types of wild shit. But um, I do appreciate the fact that this film kind of it delved into that avenue versus your traditional slasher type of film, and they told those stories.
Mhm.
So yeah, I will. The original was better in my opinion. It just
Same.
tells your more traditional story. It set the tone for everything. But the second one, I can understand. Do you remember? Was there any kind of criticism or feedback when it released? I wasn't into it, so I wasn't keeping up.
The one thing that I remember the most, and I don't get into a lot of like critics reviews. I do more user reviews or
Right.
because I feel like it's a little bit more objective. I saw that they people didn't think it was scary. People didn't think it was scary enough.
And
and
I think that goes right to the point I just mentioned. Yeah.
and also, you will always have those people who felt like it was too preachy and they don't want to be preached at. And those are pretty much the same people who will hate a movie like Get Out or, who don't really get into it. But for the people who it was made for, I feel like it got a positive reception.
Got you. Okay then. Yeah, I think they did a great job with it, with everything that they had, and um, I know we've already brought it up, the fact that you do have black people in the process, in the room, in the decisions. They're in the decision rooms. They're in um, the directors' chairs and producer chairs and things of that nature. So it is in some ways a lot of our first times to tell our story our way. So
Mhm.
we don't see it as preachy, but like you said, if it's not for you, then you might. It is what it is. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention about the second film before we kind of get into some other categories?
No, I think we covered it all. The second film was a great resurgence, I think. I think they handled it perfectly, with the exception of, like you said, some of the things that felt a little unnecessary, like that bathroom scene. I could have done without that. Uh,
Yeah, you just didn't need it.
it came out of nowhere. But
Yeah,
no, I would love to get into the
this one, the
category,
original.
this
Let's go.
1992.
So we're gonna get into best scenes, best quotes, and all that stuff. I'm not only gonna let you start. I'm gonna let you kind of guide this because it's hard for me to sit down and say I enjoyed this was one of my favorite scenes because it's not my type of thing. I'm not overly descriptive with it, but I do want to join in on the conversation and add in my 2 cents with certain things and kind of look at it from your perspective and maybe get to see this film um, from a different lens. So if you want to start, what do you have for your first scene?
Ooh, okay. So the first scene that I had as a favorite was when Helen and Bernadette first visit Cabrini Green.
Okay.
So, and when they're on their way there, and Bernadette, she's black. So she's kind of
Hmm.
telling Helen, like, listen, this is a bad idea. Like, we shouldn't be doing this. The gangs run this apartment complex, and they're gonna think we're cops. Like, we look like cops. You're white. This is
Yeah.
not what's up. They get there, and like you said, Helen has no fear. She's just like, she ready to go. She's like, just walk, just go. And when she gets in there and she starts to kind of meddle in this apartment where this woman was supposedly killed by Candyman,
Hmm.
and she's just poking around, and Bernadette is just so like, she is over it. She's not here for any of this. And this is also the introduction of Anne Marie McCoy, which I
Hmm.
actually really loved. It was a little bit of a jump scare when she busts in the apartment with her Rottweiler, and she's just like, "What are y'all doing in here?" And
Hmm.
I feel like, again, this is one of those moments where I feel like the filmmakers were trying to put in that message, which is another reason why I guess I didn't see it as problematic. They're talking to Anne Marie, and she's like, I know what you're gonna say. We're all on welfare. We're all gang bangers. We're not all like that. And I felt like
Hmm.
they did a good job of kind of putting in some real people. Like, she was just a woman with a baby trying to make her way, trying to get her baby up out of there, make sure that he grew up right. And that was my first favorite scene.
Yeah, I can appreciate that and that moment, like you said, from Anne Marie, because she also mentioned how most white people that come around, they're not the handshake types. They're
Mhm.
trying to take us away, and just the overall fact of that's really how it is as a whole. I think anything bad that you hear about Black society, mainstream. When I say you hear, I mean mainstream hears about the culture or things that go on in the places where we live or where we were placed. Is the better way to probably say that you only get the minority of it. Not everybody who lives there is like that. Actually, a large majority aren't like that, but you're just always going to get that headline. You're going to get that kind of feedback because that's what's plastered in front of you. That's what
Mhm.
sells. So that was a key moment in the film, just reminding people, the audience, like, yo, this is where we live. Like, there's a book I always talk about, The Color of Law, talks about the way America pretty much made the ghetto, made the projects, and all of that stuff. It was all intentional. Another conversation for another day. But I do love that scene, and also just the authenticity of housing projects aren't really a big thing anymore in 2023. A lot of them across the country have probably been knocked down, but just a housing project is everybody knew it. It's not somewhere if you're not from here, what are you doing here? And the way they followed her around and telling people they 5-0 and making sure they establish dominance. Like, this is our spot. Like, I don't care who you are. You coming up in here, you better announce yourself. You don't have any business here. And I think that they had to, in exchange for using the Cabrini Green projects, they had some gang members in the film as some of the background characters. Very similar to Training Day when they shot in the jungle. It was negotiated with them, like, yo, you gotta have some of the gang members, some of the bloods in the scenes, and that's how they worked it out. So I
Mhm.
do enjoy that scene as well. What you got next?
My next favorite would be the dinner scene where Helen learns the true origins of Daniel Robitaille, aka Candyman, from Purcell, the professor,
Mm-hmm.
and how she's, going in about her thesis that she's writing. And he's like, oh, well, I wrote the book on this. Like, I know the origin. And he's like, goes into the story. And I feel like this was a perfect use of the score, the music, and the cinematography, where they kind of focus in very Morticia Adams esque. They focus in on Helen's eyes, which you'll see happens a lot in the movie. They focus in, they kind of put a spotlight on her eyes and make the rest of her face kind of shadow. Um, while he's telling this story about Daniel Robitaille and how, he was a famous artist who was paid to paint portraits of all these rich white people's families. He came to Chicago to paint a portrait of this rich man's daughter. They end up falling in love and she gets pregnant. He goes on to have Daniel Robitaille killed by a mob and all of the things that happened to him, how he got his hook. And what you see later is they're focusing in on her because she actually reminds him, or she is like an embodiment of that woman that Daniel Robitaille was in love with
Mm-hmm.
all those, decades, centuries ago. And
Mm-hmm.
I just really loved like the vibe that scene gave. It was really creepy, really eerie, and the way his Purcell's voice kind of carried the story. I just
Mm-hmm.
felt it just kind of gave me chills that first time.
I can understand that completely. It's that classic throwback way of telling a scary story that you don't know if it's true or not. It's just like
Mhm.
an urban legend, one of those old campfire stories. We're in that. You and I are in the "Are You Afraid of the Dark" generation. Nick at Night. If anybody out there is in that same age range, and that's a lot of their stuff. It feels like an old campfire story, but it had some eerie moments to it.
Mhm.
Um, and you see that the wheels are spinning. Like, all right, how much of this is really, because it's also one of those things where if it does happen, nobody's going to believe you, which we see in this
Mhm.
film. Like, I'm not doing this. I'm not. This isn't even me. This is somebody after me, and this whole legend growing. So I did appreciate and like that scene as well. What do you have next?
Next, I have. I'm trying to keep it concise because I have a lot of favorite scenes from this
Go
movie.
ahead, but we're gonna talk about it. Let's go.
Um, after she after she leaves Cabrini Green, when we first are introduced to Jake, and he's telling her the story about, the little boy in the bathroom who
Mm-hmm.
got castrated by Candyman, and she goes in the bathroom. We see, the gangbanger comes in who's kind of supposed to be dressed as Candyman, and he like assaults her. That police station scene that came after that when they had those men in that lineup.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but that scene was so funny to me. Like the way they had those men reciting that line, which I also have in my favorite lines. We hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch. And they had these men saying it, and it was just so funny to me because I'm like, I can't even imagine. Like these men, like most of them just look like they were picked up off the street, and they were just
that's
like,
that's I was gonna say that's what I got from it. Like, how many of these dudes are already in here, or you just picked them up off the street when they were doing their own thing and brought them in for questioning, or not questioning, but this lineup.
but yeah, that I mean, it's not essential to the story, but for me, it was just funny. It was like a little comic little moment that I took away from it.
Yeah, it did. It reminds me of a film that came out a few years later, The Usual Suspects, using the lineup scene to kind of provide some kind of humor and some silly shit going on. It doesn't really have anything to do with the movie, but uh, it's just silly as a whole. How the whole thing goes about. What you got next?
Now, this is probably my favorite. So
Okay,
the
let's talk
scene
about it.
where Helen is in the parking garage going to her car, and it's the introduction of Tony Todd as Candyman in the parking lot. You know, she's
Okay.
walking to her car, and Tony Todd has this voice that is just, I don't know how anybody else could have done this. Like, his voice, when you hear it, is just, it's so low and chilling, and it sounds like he was just made for this role.
Mm-hmm.
And you see him, like, she turns around and she sees him standing there. He's standing there with his legs open, arms back, head tilted, and he is just terrifying. And I just, like, every time I see it, I just love him as Candyman in this movie. And it's the introduction of the famous line, you know, be my victim. And the way that he just kind of like hypnotizes her.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't necessarily know what happens after that or how he got her to where she ended up. But I feel like there's something about Tony Todd in this role that just makes the whole movie. And seeing him in that first scene, that introduction to him, will never get old to me. I look forward to that part every time I watch this movie.
Big reveal. I think the film did an incredible job of waiting until 44 minutes, 45 minutes into the film to even see him. I think we saw a quick glimpse of him in the beginning, but that was it. So this is the full reveal, this is the guy we're going up against. And like you said, it was just very chilling. If I stop and just put myself in that situation, I don't know what I would have done. And I know Helen, the actor who played Helen, her Virginia Madsen, she went through hypnosis on the set during certain scenes, but she didn't like it and ended up having to ask them to stop. But certain scenes she was hypnotized for throughout this film, which I thought was very
Wow,
fascinating.
I did not know that. That's
Hmm.
great.
Yeah, I thought that was very fascinating. But yeah, there's nothing better than um, a reveal scene, and we finally get to see this. And like you said, just the idea of having this black guy be that person, and just like, oh shit, um,
Mhm.
we don't get to see that. There is no, even Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger, they're all deformed. They have, masks, or they had some kind of injuries or accidents that happened to them to make their appearance looks different. He has the bees, which is obviously just one of those things that uh, is iconic with this
Mhm.
role. But you see everything else, and like the idea of them knowing, like, we want him because he's 6'5", just that looming figure. It worked out perfectly, and just that not knowing what happened. Like, how did Helen go from what happened between the garage and you being on Anne Marie McCoy's bathroom floor? Like, all
It's
of that tied in. So I don't know if it's my favorite scene, but I really did enjoy it. And like it wouldn't have had the same effect if this was 20 minutes into the movie. Like, we went a full 45, we get the backstory, and now we in it.
so, of course, Helen waking up in Anne Marie's apartment is another one of my favorite scenes. Um, she just, like, her waking up bewildered, covered in blood, Anne Marie screaming, the dog's head on the floor. She just like being attacked by Anne Marie because Anne Marie obviously thinks that she like killed her baby, took her baby, killed her dog, and she's just like inconsolable and like just ready to bash Helen's head against the floor. And the
Yeah.
coming in and seeing Helen with that meat cleaver, and it's like he kind of set her up in a way where he makes her lose everything. He's putting her in
Yeah.
a position to lose everything so that she doesn't have anything else to go back to except for him, so that he can take her to be his victim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was genius, even though it was incredibly evil. It was genius. And even when you tie in that scene with all the other times that somebody died, right? And it was because of Candyman. Just the being Helen, you said it best. He put her in a position to lose everything. I don't. The thing that frustrated me as a viewer is, like somebody help her. Like she's not doing this, man. Like it's not cool. It's not fair. She's not really doing this, but everybody thinks she is, and there's no way to get out of it. There's no way to get around it. You have no choice but to go seek him out and sacrifice yourself just as he wanted. And that in itself is scary as shit.
And that's kind of the running theme, like with Candyman and all of his films, you kind of see that there's always somebody that he wants, and he's framing them for all of his murders. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
he did the same thing with Anthony in the 2021 film. It was like, okay, I've marked you. I'm coming back for you. And so I'm going to make you lose everything. And you're going to have to come.
That's a great pull. Yep, he did the same thing to Anthony. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Okay, now we're getting into like closer to the end of the movie. So another scene that I really loved was when Helen is in the bathroom after she's been released from prison. She's back home. Um, she's there by herself, and that jump scare in the mirror when she
Mm-hmm.
looks in the mirror and Candyman's hook comes through the mirror. That is
Mm-hmm.
a great scene. If you're a horror lover like me, you live for a good jump scare, but it has to be a well done jump scare with something behind it. We don't like jump scares just for the sake of jump scares. We have to have some actual, you know,
We don't
meaning.
like jumps. We don't like jump scares at all. We do not like jump scares at all.
We love a good one, but it has to have something behind it. And that was a really good one.
Okay.
We don't have to get too much into that. But then jumping forward, Helen escaping from the mental hospital and
That was wild.
coming home to little Miss Stacy,
This is my favorite scene in the movie.
her house pink,
Mm-hmm.
while Trevor's just walking around in his bathrobe. Oh, sir.
This,
Okay.
this is my favorite part of the movie.
So we just, that's how we found out Trevor was not shit to begin with. Like he was, yeah, we saw him in the beginning, but now that was just confirmation that he was really doing what he was doing. And the way she walked in there and saw Stacy painting her house after a month, she had been locked up for a month.
That was insane.
And that also has one of my favorite lines, which I know we're not there yet, but that's I love it.
So the reason this was my favorite scene is mainly because they did a great job of planting the seeds throughout the entire film, even from the first time we meet Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
And women know women's intuition, mother intuition. Those are the undefeated. So she knew, like, why this girl staring at you like that? She madly in love with me. Because Professor, he tried to play it off. I forget his name.
Her husband.
Yeah, husband Troy.
Trevor.
He played it off, and then the real reveal when I knew was when she was in jail and she called, and it was the bed was made and empty.
It was
And
like
obviously
3 in the
lied,
morning.
3 in the morning, and he lied and said I was fast asleep. Like, nah, bro, I already knew what time it was. But to have the audacity to not even say anything, you still married, you don't think she's coming home, and you got this woman in here painting up. You moved her right in. Like, you really getting, there was just a body on your floor. A body was on your floor, you already moving somebody else in because that's how quick you wanted to get rid of Helen. Like, that was insane to me. So I love the fact, the look on their faces when she came in, because they did not expect that. And she kept the G. She didn't even do anything to hurt them. She left. She could have done something, but she didn't. But that sets up the end of the film.
Oh, I love that scene because when she came in there and Stacy's like, Trevor, she's scared, crying, like, oh, don't cry now, girl. Okay.
Don't cry. Don't cry now. I feel like I've seen Stacy and I know she was in some minor roles and things, but I feel like I've seen her in something specifically, and I can't think of what it is.
Me neither. She does have a familiar face. And
very familiar
I know I've
face.
seen her in something, but I could not tell you what it is.
No doubt. What other scenes you got for us?
Okay, I only have 2 more.
Okay.
So the bonfire scene where little Jake is like, burn him. He's just standing there. The whole Cabrini Green is out there setting this large pile of junk on fire. And I think they believe that they're burning Candyman. Everybody at
Mm-hmm.
this point thinks that Helen, you know, took the baby. And um, we see in the 2021 film too how that story just kind of gets convoluted over the
Yep.
years. But
Yep.
when Helen crawls out with the baby and she's on fire, she hands the baby back to Anne Marie, and then she subsequently dies. So I thought that was a great scene. She kind
Let
of
me ask you.
sacrificed herself for the baby.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that was deliberately done in the 2021 film to have people maybe question all of the things that you've been taught or you've heard, going back to however far you want to go back? Do you think that obviously we everybody knows about the telephone game where a
Mm.
story can change a million different times from the way that whoever tells it. It starts off one way and ends another. But do you think that scene was specifically placed to this is how life works, not only in fictional stuff like Candyman, but also real historical events. Like do all your homework, especially in today's society. I think Denzel has that famous clip where he talked about the importance of being correct. Most people want to be first. News
Mhm.
outlets want to be first. They don't want to be right. And being able to make sure that you do all your research before you regurgitate false information. It's very easy in today's society, the way we gather news, to put out any kind of story without any kind of facts and just you could write something on Facebook and somebody will see it and repost it because they think it's true. They haven't done any research on it and it keeps going and going. I don't know. I just picked up on that. I don't know if it was intentional, but I have a feeling that it was.
You know what? I didn't think about it like that until you just said that, but absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you say
Yeah.
it, for sure. And it goes back to, urban legend and the whole origin of Candyman in the first place, stories that have been passed down. And now, just like he told Helen in the 1992 film, our story will be whispered and told throughout the years. And that's kind of what
Mm-hmm.
happened. She became her own urban legend.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That is a very good point, which I'm sure wraps into your final theme,
Yes.
which is the bathroom scene
You
at the end.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
When Trevor is in there, Stacy's, oh, Lord. Trevor's in the bathroom while Stacy's cooking dinner, and he's all distraught, and he says Helen's name 5 times in the mirror, and she
Mm-hmm.
pops up and, "What's the matter, Trevor? Scared of something?" Oh, I love it. I love it.
You know what? That might be my favorite scene in the movie, more so than her breaking out and coming home. That was probably the most entertaining,
Yeah.
her breaking out. But this one, just because it was a great, regardless of what genre you're doing or what you're covering, I appreciate when you're not lazy with your screenwriting and you tied everything that we got this whole film. And you also gave one of my favorite pieces. I know school talks about it a lot, the revenge factor. So yeah, you're going, but they tied in him saying Helen's name, and it wasn't. You saw it coming, but he wasn't doing it on purpose. He was really distraught. The message. You don't appreciate something until it's gone, and
Mhm.
you realize, that, oh man, like her whole death wasn't even what I thought it was, and I'm doing my proper mourning, and I got this woman out here, Stacy, who I don't even like, because I'm in this feeling of emotions with everything that went on with Helen, and says her name 5 times. She pops up. Now, like you said, she's her own urban legend, her own myth, and just that scene of her opening up that bathroom door and seeing him gutted in that bathtub was just. I feel like that's what horror movies are all about. Those type
Mhm.
of images that live in your head, like damn.
Oh, yeah.
So, 100%, 100%. That was a great way to wrap up the film. I don't think you can have too much of a better ending.
Perfect ending.
Some people might say the only thing that could have made it better is if she got Stacy too, but we ain't write it. We ain't write it.
No, I'm
So
I'm happy with Stacy having that knife in her hand, and they probably thought she did it.
yeah,
Just
history repeating itself.
take Stacy down to the station and
Yeah, some people, death
let
is
her
too
think about
easy.
what she did.
Yeah, yeah, death is too easy sometimes. Some people got to sit down and think about their actions, like you said. That was good. I appreciate all those scenes that you went through. You kind of carried that because, like I
Yeah.
said, I'm not well versed enough to really structure favorite scenes and best scenes and why, but it was great joining in on that conversation. we'll get into our last few categories and wrap this up.
Okie
Best
dokie.
quotes. I know you said you had some written down.
I do. Okay. Of course, sweets to the sweet. That is a very famous line. And it actually comes from Shakespeare's Hamlet.
Hmm. What do you think the most I know you'll go through them. What's the most famous line from this film?
I think it has to be between sweets to the sweet and be my victim.
Okay. So Candyman fanatics, those are the first two quotes they're probably saying.
Yes, I think be my victim. Like, again, you're going to think I'm crazy. I'm in a horror movie lovers group on Facebook. So and there'll be people who post like, say a quote from a movie and we have to guess what the movie is from the quote. And be my victim is probably the main one that you'll see for people who want you to know that they're talking about Candyman.
Horror movies are to you what The Wire is to me. Like
What'd you say?
I said horror movies are to you what The Wire is to me. You're all wrapped up in it. You can't get enough of it.
I can't. I love it. It's
You're
not
saturated with it.
not the only thing, because I love film in general, but I do take a particular liking to horror, and I think it's just a sentimental thing for me.
Got you. Understood. What other quotes you got?
Okay. Of course I have "We hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch," because I just think that is so funny. Um, I have "I am the writing on the wall, the whisper in the classroom. Without these things, I am nothing." Basically Candyman saying, I am yeah, I'm the urban legend. I am a rumor, and that's what gives me my power. I have to keep people, thinking of me, which
Hmm.
again ties into the 2021 film at the end when the Tony Todd comes back and he tells the woman whose name I can't remember, he said, tell everyone, he has to remain the writing on the wall. I have the pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite because I just thought that was poetic.
Got you.
And of course, what's the matter, Trevor? Scared of something?
All these are all written for horror movies. These are very horror movie lines. So okay then. Scene stealer. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. The
Absolutely.
wine guy.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, for sure, man.
For sure.
I didn't say best quotes and I didn't write it down verbatim, but when he was telling that story, he mentioned, they found it in the toilet. You might as well end it if that's the case. I felt him, man.
Right. He said it was something like, yeah, they found it floating in the toilet. He never recovered from that.
Never.
Better off dead.
Yeah, for real. I felt him when he said that. He a little kid. He knew. He knew what time it was. Like, nah,
Like,
I'm
did
cool.
Jake have parents? Like, what was he doing? He was just in there, like, on
I
his
don't know.
own.
I don't know what Jake had going on or what his story was, but yeah, shout out to Looney Tune. He was definitely a scene killer. You could tell his professionalism. He was really on top of it.
He was like a little man, a little grown man.
No, straight up. That's exactly what he reminded me of. Do you have anything that bothers you?
I have one thing, and that is just, and this may just be me not understanding something about the movie, but I feel like in the scene when Helen goes back to Cabrini Green and she climbs through the mirrors, you know how they have the mirrors that come out on both sides where you can get in the apartment. The
Yeah.
scale of Candyman's lair, I felt was really, really big. And I'm like, is this just in the middle of this apartment complex? Like,
Like, yeah,
is
where
this
is all of
supposed to
this?
be one apartment or is this supposed to be like multiple? It looks like it's, kind of like
It looks
the
like an underground layer.
structure is compromised, but it's still in the same apartment building where all these people are living. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And I guess it didn't really need to make sense for the movie, but that was one thing that just kind of bothered me.
I got you. I didn't have anything, but now that you say that, I know the whole point was to make it look like some kind of like church setting,
Yeah.
in a sense, and the whole talk about sacrifice. But I always thought they were underground somewhere because that was a lot of space. So I didn't get it either. Some kind of abandoned warehouse, but obviously it had to be in the apartments. Um, any actors from The Wire? There are no actors in this film from The Wire. Wouldn't let that happen to me. Do you have anything for that?
Absolutely. Bernadette couldn't have been me. Bernadette, girl, like I get it. Helen is your home girl. She's your girl. But me, like she just got arrested for supposedly killing this woman's dog and her baby. She's
Mm-hmm.
found and you taking her flowers and
Yo, that's wild.
it couldn't have been me. Wouldn't
Yeah.
have happened to me.
I need a little bit more information on what's going on. I ain't trying to, because y'all ain't even cool like that. I'm talking about that's got to be
Yeah.
some playbox or playbox sandbox day one type stuff where I come in. I know you better than that to know that you did this. This I feel like they met in college. They just grad school
Mhm.
mates and all that. We ain't tight enough for me to be coming and bring you flowers, especially after you just got accused of catching a body because I could be next and she was, even though it wasn't Helen. I'm not putting myself in that situation. Helen was at least smart enough to know not to say that fifth Candyman. She
Like I
stopped at four. I was like, you know
yeah.
what? I'm cool. Like anytime you start messing with, summoning spirits and all that, I'm out. I'm cool.
Like,
This,
don't
this.
get me wrong. I love this movie and I love horror, but I won't even say that 5 times in front of a mirror.
Nah, that's real. It's in the 2021 film when they were the girls were in the bathroom. That one girl like, nah, I'm cool. Um, so yeah, I didn't have anything down, but Bernadette is definitely a good candidate. I do have some trivia, and then I'll say some things. And if you have anything else after that, that's you're more than
Okay.
welcome to bring that in. So the bees in this film were bred specifically for this movie. They needed to make sure that the bees were only 12 hours old. That way, they looked like mature bees, but didn't have an impactful sting. So they didn't really do much damage. That's easy for us to say because we weren't the ones being stung. While investigating one of Candyman's crime scenes, Helen and Bernadette discovered that the design of the apartment's medicine cabinet made it possible um, for a point of entry for an intruder. This came from real things that happened, where they did have some murders that they investigated, where the intruder came through on the other side of the medicine cabinet. So that was inspired from real life, and it happened in Chicago. So that was all research from Bernard Rose. Tony Todd, he credits his lawyer for negotiating $1,000 fee for every time he was stung by a bee during filming. I think he mentioned doing the three Candymans. I haven't seen the other two, like Candyman 2 or 3. Have you seen those?
I have.
Has
Um,
he's in all of them, right?
he is.
Okay, I got you. I think he said throughout 3 films he got stung 23 times, so that's 23,000 extra for being stung. So shout out to him for negotiating that. That aerial shot at the beginning of this film, that overhead shot of Chicago, watching the cars, that was revolutionary at the time. I think it was shot on a 500 millimeter camera, and no movies have really done anything like that. And obviously today we've seen countless examples. So Candyman does get some credit for that. And the one guy who we just gave our scene stealer for, he said he was too scared to watch the film when it originally came out. So when he went to the screening with the cast and crew, once he heard Philip Glass's score, the score in this film, and he saw his name in the opening credits, he left the theater and stood outside and had him. They would usher him in anytime he was on screen, so he can watch that scene. But he did not watch the entire movie when at the time of his release. So I thought that was very interesting. Do you have any other trivia facts for us?
Let me see. Actually, I feel like you've covered everything that I had. I did have that Eddie Murphy was the first choice for the film. I had that "Sweets to the Sweet" is a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet. Everything else that you said, um, I did have the piece about the gang members from Cabrini Green requiring them to let them, be
Yeah.
in the be extras in the movie in order for them to film there. Um, Oh, and then it does say that even with this arrangement, a sniper put a bullet through the production van on the last day of filming, though no one was injured.
Yep. I did mention. I did mean to put that in there. There was a shooting, so luckily nobody was hurt. Last day, probably somebody thinking they were having fun instead of doing something that was, crazy. Obviously, Cabrini Green. If you haven't heard of Hoop Dreams, if you've never seen He Got Game, which is crazy, you might have seen Hardball. Hardball was based about the Cabrini Green projects as well. Um, and then Cool and High. I think the opening scenes of shots of Cooley High were in the Cabrini Green projects. Curtis Mayfield was born, or not born, but lived in Cabrini Green projects. So just a lot of history there. Like I said, they're no longer standing, but thought all of that was worth mentioning. And now we get to the end of the film, or the end of the episode, should I say, where we rate this film. So Mia, the average viewer rates this film a 6.7 out of 10. Is that too high, too low, or just right?
I I have to say too low.
Okay, where do you got it?
I gotta give it at least I gotta give it like a 7.5.
7.5. Okay. I'm going slightly too low. I'm giving it a 7 even. I think it did enough and tried to tell enough of a story. And it was very original. I don't know how much we talked about that, but a lot of it wasn't something that you typically see from your slasher horror film. The story was original, and I did appreciate that part of it as well, which makes it a lot easier to watch versus, like I said, your screams and your everything else. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7. First black serial killer in the horror genre. So got to shout out Tony Todd for that. Um, I think that was about it. So I appreciate the knowledge and the
Thank
information that I gathered about the horror genre and the people that are in your tribe, everybody that's in your crazy Facebook group.
you.
Um, like I said, send me a list. I'm gonna try to get some in. It's about to be holiday time, so we'll see how I progress. But Mia, it was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. It
Anytime
was
we
great.
can, yeah. Anytime we can expand the conversation past anything that myself, school, or Rachel are comfortable with, we're always going to be open to that opportunity. I appreciate you making space in your schedule, and appreciate you for just loving movies and engaging with us, and always having conversations with us about what we do here at the Culture Garden. Proud to have you and call you Culture Garden family, and definitely looking forward to doing something else with you. I think we'll definitely have to have you back on. Even if it's just a yearly Halloween thing. And I got a couple other ideas I'm gonna rap to you about. So
Oh, that would be great. I
yeah,
would love to meet Smooth and Ray P.
yeah, for sure. We'll work that
Get
out.
to know them, but
Yeah,
I
we'll
would
set that up.
meet them.
We'll set that up and work that out. But thank you once again for having us, or excuse me, for coming and having us have you. Shout out to everybody out there watching, listening. Please remember to subscribe, listen, rate, review, share, the whole nine. We'll be back next week. This is a special Halloween episode, so it's not on our regular day, but we'll be back next weekend, first Thursday in November, with a new episode. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Y'all be cool. How y'all be cool. Peace.